Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for October 17th through 23rd. This week I read 2 books, I watched 4 shows, I watched 4 movies, and I listened to 1 book. The first book on my list today is I Love You, Call Me Back. This is actually a book of poetry, and it deals heavily with mental health and isolation and finding out a loved one is ill, so if any of those are triggers for you, it's probably not something that you want to pick up. However, this was absolutely lovely. I breezed through this. It's very easy to read a poetry collection, but it did have a lot of moments where I stopped to reread certain passages because they were just very clever or they kind of hit me in the gut. This basically takes place over about a month of her life, and you only know this because occasionally there are dates at the very top, and it's a lot of her living in isolation because of the world we live in. She just lives with her dog, and then the routines that she needs to go through, and talking about taking her pills and all of those types of things, and then having conversations with her mother, who has been diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm. As I said, this has some lovely turns of phrase and was just published this week, so if poetry is your thing, this should be on your radar. The other book I picked up this week was Summer Sons by Mandelo. This is a murder mystery horror book, and I ended up really enjoying it. However, it did take quite a while for the plot to really get going for me. Looking back on how the book is structured, though, I don't really understand why it felt like it was dragging so much, because right from the beginning we have this main character who is thrown into the thick of things when his best friend has been reported to have died by suicide. But he doesn't believe that's the case, so essentially he's going to move back to the town they both grew up in, live in his friend's house, meet all of his new friends they had made while they'd been apart for about 6 months, and try to figure out why his best friend is dead. And then along the way there are some queer realizations. So this book had a lot going for it, but for whatever reason it really felt very slow, and it took me quite a while to get through it, and I don't know why that was, because I did end up enjoying it. The horror aspects were wonderful, although when the very first one happened I didn't really understand what was happening initially, and maybe that's why it kind of dragged for me. I'd also like to acknowledge that I read this as a digital ARC, so there is a chance that certain phrasing has been changed, and it might have been quicker if I had read a finished copy. I don't know. If you're looking for something creepy and spooky but also queer, this is an excellent one to pick up. On to the shows I watched this week, the first thing being the entire 17th season of Grey's Anatomy. If you are aware of how this series started, one of the very first shows that I started watching back in 2017 when I started this series was from the beginning of Grey's Anatomy, because I had never seen it before, and at that point the first 13 seasons were available on Netflix. The 17th season is finally available, so I just watched it, and wow, it is not for the faint-hearted. For those of you that don't know, this entire 17th season takes place during the Panini, and it's very specific about exactly when it starts. There are many people who die because of the current world circumstances, and it obviously impacts our cast as well in different ways. Not to mention you get like halfway through the season and you feel like your heart is going to get a slight break from what's going on, and then you realize it's the beginning of June 2020. And yeah, you get hit with that again. So I enjoyed it because they're acknowledging real world problems and discussing them, and I loved seeing that, but also I can understand how this might not be a season for everyone, especially if you use your fiction primarily for escapism and then you're going into your fiction and it's being exactly what it is right now. That all being said, I continue to love this show and I'm very excited to watch the 18th season. This week we also finished the 7th season and watched all of the 8th and final season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Obviously, you can tell that this last season was meant as a we know we're ending, we can't really give you more than this is what you're going to get type of season, but that's okay with me. A part of me really likes when shows does episodes that are clearly meant to just be like a big goodbye to the audience and the cast. This continued to be funny. It had interesting plot lines, it had interesting dynamics between the characters, it had people moving on from what the current situation was, and overall, it was enjoyable. This week I stayed current on RuPaul's Drag Race UK. In this episode they were meant to do some commercials for Drag Lexa, And the most shocking thing to me is how the judges didn't like the commercials at all, especially because the teams wrote their commercials based on what they've seen the previous contestants in previous seasons do for this type of thing. So if you didn't want this type of humor, maybe you shouldn't have had it be acceptable on every other season. I'm not saying that this humor was the best thing in the world and these just were great commercials or anything like this. However, if that is the model that these people have to work on, and now you're saying that what they did was crap, you gotta look at your own past and see why it was acceptable then and it's not acceptable now. And I think actually if there was a reflective moment of that, and maybe somebody explained why we've moved past the type of humor that was being used, that would have been really nice. But instead it was just like, we're really disappointed in you, we've seen all this before. And it's like, yeah, have you seen the formula of the show? I also stayed current on Canada's Drag Race, which is only in its second season, and this was the second episode, and it was a rusical. It was a clown-based rusical, which I really enjoyed. There were some wonderful performances, however it's difficult because in these scripts there's always these different roles that require playing off somebody else in a very big way, like being completely in sync with two other people, for example, and that is always way more difficult than the roles that are just plain basically monologuing roles, and we always see people struggling with those because they don't have enough time to really have that rapport and really rehearse them. So I'm always questioning when they choose to include these roles that are just like two people or three people basically having to be very, very in sync and having to be exactly perfect to each other when they don't really have the time to rehearse that type of thing. On to the movies we watched. To continue the Triple October vibes, we watched The Craft, which I probably haven't seen since I was a child. This one is about some high school witches and some bad things go down. The guy who plays Jughead's dad on Riverdale is in it, and there was a whole plot line about that that I did not enjoy. You know how there's always like a love spell in these types of things? I always hate how that turns into the person just actually trying to sexually assault the person they love. Those are two different things. If it was a lust spell, I could understand it. When it's a love spell, I hate when it flips into danger. It's just, it really bothers me. Also, these girls flipped into being very harsh at the end, like straight up just wanting to commit murder to their friend who was just basically saying, hey, maybe don't be evil to people. So yeah, it could have been better. But it's also very, and I'm not saying that I didn't like it, I'm just saying that upon rewatching it for the first time with fresh eyes many years later, it could have been a little bit better, but it was still entertaining for what it is. We also watched The Mist, which has at least 3 cast members from The Walking Dead, and then several other people you're going to recognize from several other things. Within 3 seconds of seeing one character, you're like, oh my goodness, Captain Dad just said the F word, which is amazing. This is a movie based on a Stephen King short story about this mist that rolls into town and traps a bunch of people in a supermarket, and then creepy, gross alien type things start appearing out of the mist, and people sometimes die, sometimes there's religious characters that create a cult within like a day, which like, that's impressive but also terrifying. And you know, some people doing what they can to survive while other people just want to see the world burn. We also went back 21 years and watched Scary Movie, which I haven't seen since it came out. I knew at the time when I was watching it that it was going to be one of those types of movies with humor that some of it I wasn't going to appreciate, so revisiting it, I knew that it wasn't going to be my favorite thing in the world, and you know what? It's not. There are some jokes that definitely are transphobic, don't need to be there, but it is meant to be ridiculous. So on the whole, when they're doing the ridiculous things and it's not punching down to a minority, I'm okay with it. It is a comedic take on horror tropes, and for that I can appreciate it. It's just every once in a while I really don't appreciate the joke. Continuing on that trend, we also watched Scary Movie 2, which I had never seen before. However, I was very excited that Tim Curry is in it. I was less excited that at no point did it make a direct Rocky Horror reference, because that would have been perfect, especially because it mostly takes place in this mansion and there is a laboratory in it. So like, if there had been at least a line, a single line that referenced Rocky Horror, I would have been so much happier. But missed opportunity. This one also had the guy who played Francis on Malcolm in the Middle, which made me laugh really hard, and also I pointed out that he is the brother to the guy that played Hyde on that 70s show to Justin, who was watching with us, and he was like, I can't believe I never noticed that before. I'm like, why would you? So yeah, when you take these for what they are, which is just absolutely ridiculous, then, you know, they're a good enough way to spend the night. If you want to talk about the specific jokes, not all of them land. The audiobook I listened to this week was Hold Back the Tide. This one takes place in a rural town in Scotland, and it doesn't say a specific date, but it's well before now. This definitely is in the current times. There's no modern technology. It's a lot of the atmosphere of main characters making their own bread and stews over the stove. Also, it opens with our main character talking about how to survive living with a killer, so there's that. Our main character is in her teens and she lives off in the middle of the woods by a loch with her dad. 7 years previously, her dad killed her mother and she's been terrified of him ever since and has created these rules for herself so that she can survive this situation, and very soon she's actually going to be escaping, but that's only if her plan comes together. They live in this isolation from the rest of the town, one, because he is actually the loch keeper. There's actually a Gaelic word for that, but I can't remember it right now, and I wouldn't be able to spell it in the captions anyway, let's be honest. But essentially his role is to watch the loch, kind of patrol it, make sure the water levels aren't dipping too much, which they currently are, and he's not really telling anyone, which is also a concern to the daughter, but she's like, you know what, I'm gonna be out of here really soon, so that's not gonna be my problem. They also live away from town partly because he is from an outcast family. Essentially there's a guy that basically runs the town because he employs all the people to work at the mill in town, and he does not like her dad, so there's this animosity type of thing. Because he doesn't like her dad, people also look down on her, so she is a bit of an outcast as well. I didn't really know much about this going into this. I think this might have been a recommendation from Jean, I can't remember. However, if you are listening to it as an audiobook, it is read with a beautiful Scottish accent, which I honestly miss because I used to live in Scotland for a year and I miss hearing that accent all the time, so that was absolutely lovely. In addition, as she's getting ready to leave this whole life behind, some spooky things start happening. I don't want to wreck it for you because I didn't know about it going in, but this was absolutely wonderful, even down to the way it ended. It was just all perfection for me. I just really enjoyed this book. It was structured really well. You really got to know the characters. There was gore, there was horror, there was scary situations. There was just a lot, and I very much enjoyed it. That's it for this week. If you read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you have to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is always down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!